In Chinese culture, the number 4 is considered cursed, seen as unlucky, evil, and is even associated with death. Some may consider this to be a rather obscure piece of symbolism to apply to a simple numeric indication. Some people have the impression that it's fitting, that it has metaphysical truth behind its mystery. This strange piece of trivia is relevant given today's topic. The Big Four, a series of White Star Line ocean liners launched and sailing around the early 1900s. The Big Four were legends in their time, and although history doesn't recall them often, they deserve some attention for their innovative design, famous passengers, and their oh-too-many accidents. The Big Four were designed for the New York route, meant to succeed the RMS Oceanic in many ways, and in the process accidentally caused her sister, the Olympic, to be cancelled. They were pretty massive ships in their time, unmatched until the launch of the Mauretania, truly a testament to their once awesome scale. They were truly uninteresting ships, but their number of accidents alone makes them worth discussing. First in our lineup is the RMS Celtic. Here's one you won't see in your everyday Hobby Lobby. Celtic's primary feat in her time was that she was the first vessel to outweigh Isambard Brunel's Great Babe, the Great Eastern, the laughingstock of the nautical community. The RMS Celtic weighed over 20,904 gross registered tons, while the Great Eastern was a measly 18,915 gross registered tons. This was a significant accomplishment and was a testament to how far ship design had come since 1858, still proving that the Great Eastern was too much too early, while the RMS Celtic was just right for her time. Celtic featured a length of 701 feet with a 75-foot beam, twin screw steam propulsion engines, and 2 funnels, soon to be acting as the would-be standard for her class. Celtic was launched in April of 1901 and completed by July. Celtic's other major break was that she was one of the first White Star liners to be designed prioritizing passenger comfort over speed. You know how the RMS Republic was called the millionaire ship because she had an emphasis on first-class accommodations? Well, the RMS Celtic and her sisters were similar but for third class. She held 2,859 passengers in total, only 347 in first class, 160 in second class, and a monstrous 2,352 in third class, with 335 crew scattered here and there. Her accommodations were above standard for the time, with lovely cabins, a fancy dining saloon, and a heart-burning smoking room. Now time for the nitty-gritty of the ship, her illustrious career. Celtic was large in her day, which means she could be a bit unwieldy from time to time. Her first incident occurred when she collided with the British ship Heathmore, or more so it collided with her, resulting in Heathmore's bow being crunched. On a more serious note, on another voyage, a passenger tried to kill himself by jumping overboard, causing a stir about the ship. In 1914, Celtic collided with the Italian SS Madonna, but surprisingly both survived in pretty decent shape. One could even say shipshape. Overall, she had a decent running career up to World War I. At the outbreak of the war, she was immediately converted into an armed merchant cruiser until 1916, when she was reconverted and transformed back to transport troops and supplies. In February of 1916, Celtic struck a sea mine laid by U-80, the same submarine that sank the RMS Laurentic. 17 people died in the initial blast, but she stayed afloat and continued to Wales to complete her route, and then went back to be repaired in Liverpool. That's pretty impressive given that she still continued her delivery after being wounded. About a year later, a torpedo hit her, killing 6, but she proved resilient and stayed afloat. Celtic lasted the war to continue civilian service through the 1920s, even bringing Einstein back to Europe after his horrendously strenuous, as he called it, first tour of America in 1923. She suffered another collision in the late 20s with the coast of New Hampshire. She grounded in 1928 and was scrapped on site, being finished off in 1933. 1 down, 3 to go. Next up is the RMS Cedric, launched in August of 1902 and completed in February of 1903, having a much longer completion time than that of her sister. Cedric was essentially a moderately upgraded Celtic, and being 21,000 gross registered tons, she stole the title of largest ship in the world from her sister. The Big Four were what's known as storm fighters, ships designed to weather intense gales wherever they popped up. Cedric lived up to the title, weathering many terrible storms on her career with minimal damage. Often harsh waters slammed against her hull and waves struck so high that they left salt lines on her funnels. The North Atlantic was ruthless at times. White Star Line knew this from the SS Atlantic disaster, so they weren't going to take any risks. Designing these ships to sustain general comfort against harsh storms was a wise move and a testament to the whole comfort over speed thing. She also served the Liverpool to New York route before briefly running winter cruises in the Mediterranean. In 1912, she was intended to carry back the Titanic's crew, but they got snatched up for court inquiries, so she didn't take them. In the First World War, Cedric was mid-Atlantic when the British declared war on Germany. She was now in potentially hostile waters and had to get to a neutral port ASAP. She fortunately met up with the HMS Essex, which escorted her to Halifax, and soon she returned to England safely. Her final commercial voyage before requisitionment was in October of 1914, and as she left Liverpool she carried 500 Irish on board, many of whom were attempting to dodge the English draft for the war. On her returning trip, she carried her first Canadian soldiers across the Atlantic and was then converted into an armed merchant cruiser. Cedric had many more adventures in World War I, including accidentally ramming and sinking the Canadian Pacific Line's SS Montreal. After the war ended and a brief fire breached one of her cargo holds, she decided to ram into a car float during a storm in 1920. It screwed over her rudder so badly that it had to be removed, having a replacement shipped from England costing $100,000. Soon after, she was refitted at Harland and Wolff to hold less passengers with better accommodations, and was immediately sent into service to bring White Star some desperately needed revenue. I also found a cute story of a cat named Minnie that had kittens and weathered a storm aboard her in 1922. And then she rammed the Cunarder RMS Cedric. She finally was scrapped in the early 30s. Now we have the RMS Baltic, oddly enough the most popular of the big four despite them all being almost identical. She was launched in November of 1903 and was completed in June of 1904, also serving the Liverpool to New York route. She was 23,876 gross registered tons, being the final ship in her class to hold the title of largest ship in the world. Her first incident was when she rammed and sank a coal barge in 1907 off of New Jersey City. She was undamaged, but it certainly wasn't a proud moment for the White Star Line. Later that very same year, she narrowly avoided another collision and accidentally grounded, and didn't come unstuck until high tide the next day. Her moment in the spotlight, however, was in 1909, when a fellow White Star liner, the RMS Republic, collided with the SS Florida off of the Nantucket Shoals, an area that I've dubbed the place where dangerous shallows and uncoordinated helmsmen fall for each other. It has over 3,000 shipwrecks, and a good chunk of them are from collisions, not even from the shoals themselves. Unbelievable. The RMS Baltic was nearby when the RMS Republic and SS Florida collided, and she rushed over to find the ships linked at an almost perfect right angle. Baltic rescued all of the people aboard the Republic, which quietly slipped under the surface, the only casualties being 6 who all died from the initial collision. This was also the first emergency at sea to use wireless signals to call for assistance, and the Republic became the largest ship ever to sink. Can you think of how long that lasted? The incident was a relief to the public to see how quote-unquote safe ships were now. Can you think of how long that lasted? But this ain't another Titanic clickbait video. We're here to talk about the RMS Baltic. Oh, that was kinda bad timing because her next major event she was involved in was on the night of April 14th, 1912, when she sent this transition to the Titanic. Warning of icebergs. At the outbreak of World War I, Baltic was fully booked with passengers trying to flee the war. Soon after, she found it hard to fill her cabins as the fear of submarines now dominated the public's mind. She became a troop carrier and even carried General John Pershing of the American Expeditionary Forces. And although she had a few brief spouts with submarines, she came out of the war unscathed and resumed White Star Line service in 1918. In December of 1929, Baltic rescued the crew of a sinking schooner known as the Northern Lights, her crew being noted for bravery in the rescue. The Baltic's third officer, J.H. Walker, was awarded $100 of gold as a result. Unfortunately, she was scrapped in Osaka, Japan in 1933. The Baltic served a decent career, spending most of her time being a big teddy bear on the Atlantic and in the Mediterranean. Wait, the Mediterranean? You know what's in the Mediterranean? The Adriatic Sea. Boom. Awesome transition time. The final ship of the class was my personal favorite of the big four, the RMS Adriatic. Now, Adriatic was launched on September 20th, 1906, but her launch was overshadowed by the launch of the massive Cunarder RMS Mauretania the very same day. This unfortunately meant Adriatic never held the title of largest ship in the world. Mauretania at completion was 31,938 gross registered tons, dwarfing the Adriatic's 24,541 gross registered tons. Despite this, she was beautiful and an adventurous vessel, captained by E.J. Smith, the future captain of the Titanic. Yes, I know that's not a unique trait among her class, but please work with me here. Now, I know you'll expect me to say she was for the Liverpool to New York route, and that's not incorrect. But in actuality, she was the first White Star liner to try the Southampton to Cherbourg to New York route. Nice, let's shake it up a little. Adriatic, however, did end up back in the Liverpool service when the Olympic came into the picture, so... Adriatic was legendary for first-class accommodations, being the first ship on the sea with a swimming pool and a Turkish bath. This was a trait that was carried on to the Olympic class as well. She had a luxurious dining room and was designed to be as though you weren't even on the seas, like a fancy hotel. Adriatic was the culmination of what worked among her 3 older sisters. After her maiden voyage, Captain E.J. Smith stated, quote, "I will say that I cannot imagine any condition which could cause a ship to founder. I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that," end quote. I'm not even going to get into that. In 1908, Adriatic made the White Star Line look reliable and trustworthy, when a large portion of her crew was arrested for stealing $6,000 worth of passenger belongings. If you're curious why she wasn't the most popular of ships, this could be it. Adriatic briefly grounded outside of New York in 1909, but she got out of the situation in only a few hours. After the Titanic disaster, Adriatic carried Joseph Bruce Ismay back to England, and carried many of the Titanic's former passengers back as well. The reason anyone would ever want to go to England is beyond me, nevertheless go back, but that's just my opinion. Now for the war. Adriatic continued passenger service in the war longer than her sisters, but she did end up as a troop ship. Even on her passenger trips, she had guns mounted on her deck, and carried supplies such as ammo, weapons, and even planes and automobiles. After the war, Adriatic continued her normal passenger service, and was the first White Star ship to run the New York to Southampton route since the outbreak of the war. After that, she was involved in a sort of weird mail operation. While she was steaming for New York, a British plane passed and flew over her with the intention of dropping a mail pouch to her. First, they threw down a weighted cable to her crew, and when they had secured hold on it, they dropped the pouch in the ocean. Her crew used the cable to retrieve the mail, and it worked quite well, her being the first steamer to have European mail delivered to her this way. The method didn't really catch on, but it worked in a pinch. In 1922, disaster struck the Adriatic. In the early morning hours of August 11th, a broken cable caused an explosion from one of her coal bunkers, killing 5 crew. A fire started as a result, and although it was rapidly tamed, enough damage had been done by the initial explosion. She finished her route and was sent to be repaired. In the Depression, Adriatic functioned as a Mediterranean cruise ship rather than a transatlantic ocean liner, but to the same fate as her sisters, Cunard White Star scrapped her in 1934, ending a long and illustrious career, and ultimately concluding the final chapter of the Big Four. So what did we learn? That is a great question. The Big Four were all gorgeous steamers and stood as resilient and notable ships for the White Star Line. I give them slack for their frequent accidents, but given that their entire class lasted the First World War and at least into the late 1920s, I think they deserve a little bit more respect and a little bit more credit.